Evolving world and regulation of cryptocurrency. We're delighted to welcome all of you here this evening. I am Andre Cummings, the new dean of the law school, and am delighted to be able to introduce this event to everybody this evening and to congratulate Professor Christian Johnson for organizing what will be, no doubt, a exciting and transformative, informative event. And I say transformative for this reason. I was on the phone with my 22-year-old son on my walk from the library building to here because I still am trying to understand what his full-time job is. So this is what he texted me. I said, text me the title of your job. He is the Content Marketing Associate for Tron, DAO. Tron is one of the most profitable blockchains in the world, transacting a third of Visa's annual settlement value every year, circulating $62 billion of USDT, a stablecoin pegged to the US dollar. How many of you understood that?
Oh,
good,
sorry.
good. Some of y'all understood what my son does. Transactions coming mostly from peer-to-peer with over 265 million total users. All I know is when he got this job in June, as his first paycheck was in cryptocurrency. To which I said, dude, do you really have a job? Like what is this? What's happening? And he said, yeah, I do. And he proved it to me because he went to the bank, he bought some Ethereum, changed it into a coin or something, and got cash out of the bank. So he also told me on the call, on the walk up here, that there are basically crypto like ATM type machines in malls. I can't remember the word he used for it, but he assures me that he's getting paid to work for Tron. And as I understand it, Tron helps stabilize foreign currencies. So in Argentina, for example, with the inflation rate going through the roof, folks will get paid and then immediately buy USDT through Tron to stabilize their paychecks, because apparently by the time they get to the grocery store after getting paid, the value of their paycheck has precipitously dropped. So they're using cryptocurrency to stabilize foreign currencies, and he would probably be embarrassed to hear me describe it that way.
That's great.
Thank you. That's how I understand my 22-year-old son's job.
Is he taking you to dinner?
He's currently in Salt Lake City, but he owes us more than dinner. And he just graduated from Temple University with a master's in communication. So I couldn't be more excited to hear this tonight. I'm really trying to get a handle on cryptocurrency, as is the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And these two are going to really help us understand cryptocurrency, the challenge of regulating it, and what we're trying to do in this country to get a handle on regulating cryptocurrency. So Sandra Rocks is here with us, as is Kathryn Witchger.
Witchger, yep.
And I'm delighted to welcome you all here to our law school this evening. As I often say, one of the best law schools in the United States, and I'm bringing to you one of the best professors in this arena, Professor Christian Johnson, to introduce our speakers tonight. Welcome here, Professor Johnson.
Thank you, Dean Cummings. This is really an extraordinary opportunity for us here in Harrisburg, because there's not a big cryptocurrency group doing business here, and everyone, though, is interested in how cryptocurrencies work, what they are, what the rules and regulations are, where the things we need to work on and what we need to do with it. And Sandra Rocks has driven down from New York City. This is her third visit to our law school. She is counsel emeritus at Cleary Gottlieb, she's based in the New York office. And you can see her complete bio, but we claim her in central Pennsylvania because she's a graduate of Susquehanna University, which is just up 78, correct?
Straight up the river.
Straight up the river. So, yeah.
What is that?
Or up.
11 to 15. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, I was close. It's in central Pennsylvania. And Kathryn Witchger and her husband have come up from North Carolina to talk with us. Kathryn is senior legal counsel on the crypto blockchain team at Fidelity Investments. And she's a graduate of Georgetown and of, I want to say Columbia. We go to the Columbia University where she went to law school. So we are thrilled to have them here and very fortunate that they're willing to spend so much time to come down and visit with them. So please join me in thanking them for coming.
All right, so this is basically Kathryn's show. At the end, I'm going to talk about some ongoing drama involving the Uniform Commercial Code, which kind of sounds like an impossible combination of words, but it's happening. Okay, Kathryn, tell them what you got.
I feel that no cryptocurrency presentation would be complete without at least some drama. Didn't expect it from the UCC front.
And the first dramatic statement is our disclaimers. What you're
Yes.
about to hear is our own personal views, not those of our employers or clients or anyone else we know, including family members.
That was a very thorough disclaimer. I
you go.
appreciate that. Great. So welcome here today, and I hope Sandy will feel free to liberally comment on this presentation as we go through. So we're going to do a couple of things. The purpose, when we were thinking about developing this, we were thinking, okay, what would be helpful for you all to understand about cryptocurrencies and kind of how they function, and what are some key questions that you might receive from friends and family, from your clients that you'll need to know moving forward. So the first one is just for some of you who have worked in cryptocurrencies before, this may be a little bit of a repeat, but for the rest of us, we're going to first talk about what is cryptocurrency and what is blockchain technology and how does it function? Because that's really key to understanding how the law then fits on top of it. And then the second question is, okay, we're hearing a lot of regulatory fuss from the SEC, from the CFTC. We're going to focus on the SEC for this presentation. We could focus on so many different regulatory agencies and have full presentations on each. We're going to just focus on SEC for now because they're the loudest. And then how do I advise a client who wants to hold digital assets? This will tie in with what we discussed last year some, but we'll keep this a little more high level, just so that you know you have the tools in your hands to let your clients know whether the way they're holding digital assets is a secure way under the law. And then we have the drama about the 2022 amendments and the UCC. When did they get political? Because they have. Alrighty. So here's a little table of contents. So cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrencies is a subset of what I like to call digital assets. I just think it's a lot clearer if we lay that out front. So cryptocurrencies themselves, how do they work? They use cryptography to secure transactions. They control and have a creation of a unit. So these are the tokens like Bitcoin or Ether. And they verify, and then they use cryptography to verify the transfer of assets. And then each cryptocurrency typically operates on its own blockchain. So Bitcoin is going to operate on the Bitcoin blockchain. Ether is going to operate on the Ethereum blockchain. Sol is going to operate on the Solana blockchain. And then there's exceptions, of course. Some cryptocurrencies could be added onto the Ethereum chain, even though they're not Ether, right? So you can have multiple cryptocurrencies on one chain, but a lot of the big names that you hear, they're called the native token of that blockchain. So here's some examples: Bitcoin, Ether, XRP. So what are the use cases? So we know one of them, payments, buy and sell using cryptocurrencies. I think the dean had a really great example there. You can use it to stabilize price. So if I'm getting paid in a cryptocurrency that has a stable price, then I can use that to buy and sell and know the value of what I'm buying and selling, and my currency won't go up and down. You can use it for investments. Some of these are very volatile instruments. So Bitcoin, Ether, very, very volatile. Their prices go up and down. So some people like to hold on to them or short them in order to make money in the market or lose money. There's some investment use cases that are unique to crypto. One of those is called staking, which I'll talk about in a second. And then there's other unique use cases too, such as yield pools and derivatives. And I'll briefly touch on those, but those start to get into pretty complicated technology. All right, and then the last one, So why are people, okay, so this sounds a lot like, okay, cash, I can use cash to buy and sell things. I can use securities to short and to hold and go long or short on them and make my investments that way. Why would I want to use a cryptocurrency? So there's some technical benefits that mean a lot of folks in the market want to hold cryptocurrencies. One of them, as we discussed before, was cross-border transactions. Their simplicity. If I want to get paid I'm going to throw out the word stablecoin, but I promise I'll explain what it is. If I want to get paid in a stablecoin, then I know that the value of what I'm getting paid in is going to stay stable with the US dollar or whatever it's pegged to, and I can send it across borders without having to wait for wire transfers to complete. So I don't know if you've ever tried to send money to someone in a foreign country, but I have. It's terrible. Cryptocurrency makes that a lot more simple because it travels over the blockchain. And then another benefit is near instantaneous settlement. If I send securities to Sandy, it's going to take a little while for my intermediary to talk to her intermediary to transfer the securities from me to her. When you do a crypto transaction, it's a near instantaneous settlement. And we'll explain kind of why that is too. Great. So now we get to the taxonomy. So I kind of went through cryptocurrencies. That's the term that you all hear most. But digital asset is kind of the broader term for all of these assets. There's another type that's called a stablecoin. These are what the dean described. USDT is USD tether. So it's a token that is pegged to the dollar. So for every token, every tether is worth $1 US. So every USDT is worth $1. There's others like USDC. Each one is worth $1. And then there's other ways to peg stable coins, and some of them are not pegged to $1, they're pegged to another financial instrument. So they get complicated fast, but the standard typical ones that are used in the industry a lot are pegged to US dollar. Then there's central bank digital currencies. Sandy's going to talk about these in a bit. These have caused quite a fuss. Before we describe cryptocurrencies, they're not backed by the full faith and credit of a government, right? A government isn't backing Bitcoin. But a central bank digital currency, the idea would be that a government would be backing that. So it would be their form, their money in cryptocurrency, in a crypto value, represented as a digital asset. So there's lots of ways to do that too. We've listed some on the slide if you are interested in the structures. So then there's utility tokens. These are tokens where you think of it more like, you go to a laundromat or you go to a gumball machine and you have those specific quarters that only fit in the gumball machine. So it's like one of those quarters that fits in the gumball. It's not a quarter, it's just that little token. It fits in the gumball machine and you can only use it for the gumball machine, right? So utility tokens, they provide a right to some sort of good or service. Then we have tokenized financial instruments. These are, you probably heard that Franklin Templeton and Wisdom Tree and certain other large financial institutions have started to issue mutual funds that are tokenized. Like you hold a digital asset rather than holding what you would normally hold, like a security. So
yeah, you'd normally be the registered owner of a mutual fund share, but
So the way that they show the registered ownership is through the blockchain rather than showing it on the traditional books. That's a much more accurate way of describing it, rather than on the books and records of the transfer agent. So blockchain technology is infiltrating that area too, and folks are tokenizing different financial instruments, not just securities, loans, commodities, derivatives, bunch of fun stuff. And then you've probably heard of the infamous NFTs.
Endlessly.
Yes.
Those I really don't understand.
I don't think
anyone would want one.
I don't understand why anyone would
that
want them.
Bored ape. That's so weird. What is that?
Yeah. So they're still around. They're still kicking. But the important thing to realize about them is all of these other digital assets that I've described before, they're fungible amongst themselves. So if I had 10 Bitcoin and Sandy had 10 Bitcoin, we could swap our Bitcoin and we'd still each have 10 Bitcoin. But with an NFT, each one is unique. And what a lot of folks don't understand is that most NFTs, most of them, not all, but most of them, even though they say they show that you own something, what they're really doing is they've got a link And that link, you click on the link and it goes to the image of the cyberpunk monkey. And then so you're not really owning that image, but the NFT is supposed to represent that ownership. Whether it actually does is a whole area of commercial law that we won't get into today. But for the most part, they don't actually give you actual ownership. So that's a fun little thing.
But a lot of fun litigation
Yeah, a
involving
lot of fun.
NFTs. Yeah, like wasn't Birkenbag one of them?
Yeah.
I think they had a litigation on that too.
Yeah.
And the Bored Ape.
Yeah. Okay. So I've talked about all of these cryptocurrencies, and it's okay, you told me that they can travel near instantaneously, and you've told me that they can go cross-border fast, but they're not using our SWIFT system. They're not, so how are they transferring from one place to another? And I think the easiest way to think about the way that they're transferring from one place to another is to look at today. Like, how do we transfer assets today? If I want to send Sandy securities, I will say to my intermediary, and let's say Sandy also has the same intermediary, and I would say,
Should we pick one?
Yeah.
Maybe like it could
You
be,
pick ones that
no,
I can't.
pick. Yeah. Okay, we could say like Goldman Sachs.
There we go. We'll go Goldman Sachs. So let's say Goldman Sachs. So I say to Goldman Sachs, hey, I've got 10 of this ABC security. Send it over to Sandy. Goldman Sachs will say, okay, great. Sandy has an account with us. I'm going to cross off the line in the ledger that says Kathryn owns the 10 and write that Sandy owns this 10, now owns this 10 in my ledger. Done. Unlike the way it was in the 60s, nobody's, for the most part, passing actual certificates of securities anymore. They're just ledger lines. So if we think about what, and it all is centered, who's holding that ledger, one entity. It's Goldman Sachs, and then if you go up the flow, it all goes back to DTC, but we don't need to get into that complexity. There's always an intermediary. It's always centralized. So what is this revolution with distributed ledger technology? So we still have a ledger. We had a ledger before. It's how we show ownership of one person owns something versus another person. In a distributed ledger system, including blockchain, the record of the transaction is held on a peer-to-peer basis. So I run a node that connects to the blockchain. Sandy runs a node that connects to the blockchain. Both of us will have the same ledger. And we will, if I want to send digital assets to Sandy, we will send them, put them on the blockchain. The blockchain, all of the nodes on the blockchain say each of you are nodes. Some of you will be nodes that participate in validating transactions. So some of you will look at our transaction and say, is this a valid transaction? And you'll use a consensus mechanism, that's what it's called, and I will go through that a little more depth, a consensus mechanism to determine whether that transaction is valid. And once that transaction is valid, you'll say, yes, we're adding this block to the blockchain. You'll send it on to Sandy, and suddenly the ledger will update. And I will have a copy of the ledger, Sandy will have a copy of the ledger, each of you will have a copy of the ledger. So what's really cool about that is you no longer have this centralized intermediary, you have a distributed ledger.
In theory, less opportunity for mistake.
In theory.
Incorrect entries, et cetera, in theory.
So we've got, what is blockchain? It's a distributed ledger. It uses cryptography to secure transactions. And then the last bit is there's some sort of consensus mechanism for determining what transactions are valid and what transactions are not valid. I kind of went through this already, but this is a nice little diagram of how you transfer. I'm not going to go through soft forks and hard forks. I did that last year, but I left the slides up because I love these slides and I want you to have them. So if you get a copy of this presentation, you can learn about those too, but they won't really be the focus of this presentation. What I really want to focus on here is the digital ledger technology taxonomy, like some of the keywords that you're hearing that I promised I'd explain. So because I just talked about consensus mechanisms, I'm going to start with the bottom yellow box that says proof of work. So this is one of those consensus mechanisms. I was telling you that each of you who are participating in this node as a node and validating transactions, you have to have a way to say that this transaction is valid. There's a couple of ways you can do that. One is proof of work, one is proof of stake. There are many others, but those are the two main ones that you'll hear people talking about. Proof of work, is an incredibly technologically dense consensus mechanism. It involves whoever's participating as a validator will solve these complex math problems, and if the math problem fits with the data that I sent to the blockchain, then they'll say, okay, this is valid, and then they'll place the block on the block they'll add the block to the blockchain, and that's how they show the math problems are such. They're so difficult and they require so many resources that there's a disincentive to incorrectly put a new block on. You're spending a lot of time and money into this process. So
A lot of electricity.
a lot of electricity. That's why you hear a lot of environmentalists very upset about proof of work. So proof of stake is a little more simple, much easier to understand. What you do is let's say I'm staking on the Ethereum network. I would send a certain amount of Ether, put it in a smart contract, and it would be locked up. I'll explain what a smart contract is too. Let's just say I send it someplace to get locked up. And I will not touch that. I am not able to touch that Ether that has value while I'm participating as a validator in the network. So when a transaction comes in, I run the software that helps me determine whether the transaction is valid or not. If I correctly validate transactions using this software, and if I'm quick about it, I get money. I get rewards in Ether. If I do it incorrectly, or if I try and mess with the system, and there's multiple people validating transactions, so if one person says it's wrong and everybody else says it's right, then there's a good chance that person's lying. So that's how they kind of, keep an eye on each other. And if I do it wrong, then what they'll do is they'll take that money that I put in that stake and they'll take some of it away. You didn't do a good job, you did it too slowly, you tried to fool the system, so we're gonna take away some of your money. And so that's kind of the incentives that they use in order to make sure that transactions are validated correctly.
So bigger players play in this area than in the proof of work.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of infrastructure, and often they will relocate to countries where electricity is less expensive in order to do a proof of work to mine, because it requires so much computing power. So that's kind of consensus mechanisms. I'm going to start at the top now and kind of go through. So one of the key components of blockchain, I said before, is cryptography. It's how do I know that when I send the digital asset to Sandy, she's the only one that's going to be able to access that digital asset? And how do I know who to send it to? So there's this great innovation in computer science called asymmetric encryption. And so she shows everyone this public key address. It's anybody can access anybody else's public key address and see what it is. There's a private key that's associated with that public key that only you would know. So Sandy would only have access to her private key.
And hopefully never lose it.
And hopefully never lose it. We'll get to what happens if you lose it in a bit. But so Sandy will have the private key. So everybody knows her public key address. So if I want to send Sandy 10 ETH, I will say, hey, Sandy, I see your public key. I'm going to send you 10 ETH. I send it to her. And then she uses her private key to decrypt what I've sent. And then she has access to the funds and can send them somewhere else. So that's how the public-private key encryption works. So a lot of people talk about wallets. Like, oh, you have your crypto wallet. Unlike the wallet in your pocket, if I had a wallet, I do. If I had a wallet, I can open it up, and then I can pull out my cash. And I've got like a $20 bill, I can pull it out. I don't have one in there. I'm cashless right now. Right. Sorry, it's my generation. Anyway, I can pull out the cash, and my wallet is holding my cash. Wallet, when it comes to cryptocurrencies, is a misnomer. It's not holding your digital assets. Your wallet is holding your private key. And your private key is what allows you to transfer digital assets. But remember, what is a digital asset? It's just a ledger line. It's just a line that says, Kathryn has 10 ETH. And then when I transfer it to Sandy, it erases and it goes, it adds on a new block. Right, I should say that. Yeah. It adds on a new block that says, Kathryn no longer has 10 ETH, Sandy has 10 ETH. So the wallet just stores the private key. And it also, for most systems, has the user interface, because I don't know about you, but I can't code. So if I had to look at all that code and try and determine how to send something to somebody else, there'd be problems very quickly. So the wallet also has this interface that looks pretty, and it says, oh, you want to send? Enter the address you want to send it to. So that's kind of what a wallet is. You can hold your digital assets in a lot of different ways, and I'm going to talk about those custody methods, but just a basic understanding of when they say, are you holding it in a hot wallet or a cold wallet? It's not like a cool wallet or a not cool wallet, or what they mean is your wallet connected to the internet or not? If it's connected to the internet, that's a hot wallet. If it's not connected to the internet, that's a cold wallet. And as you can imagine, it's pretty hard to hack something that's not connected to a cold wallet. I mean, not connected to the internet. You have to literally go find it, its physical location, and then hack it there, pick it up, steal it. So folks use cold wallets to really extra secure their assets.
But it's just holding their key.
It's just holding their key.
Right.
Secure their assets and not allow anyone else to transfer their assets. It's just
Right.
holding their key. So I guess another thing that I've already mentioned once, I promised I'd explain it, smart contracts.
It's used so much as if
Yes.
it's really a thing, and it's really
It's not a contract.
right.
It's a computer program. It's an if-then statement. Many computer programs are just if-then statements. If the sky is blue tomorrow, then send Sandy 10 ETH. That would be an example of a smart contract, a rather silly one. Let's say my company pays me, they don't, but let's say they pay me in cryptocurrency and I receive 50 ETH a day. That would be a crazy amount. But let's just say I could put in a smart contract in place that says, if my wallet receives 50 ETH, send 10 to Sandy, send 10 to my mom. And it would just automatically do that for me. So smart contracts are more like computer programs. I'm gonna leave permission and permission out of this because we don't really, that's not gonna really touch on what we're talking about now. But one thing that's really helpful and I think is important to understand is DeFi, which is decentralized finance. So if I wanna get a loan, I can go to a bank and get a loan, right? But I could also go up to you and I could say, hey, would you loan me $10, right? And I could get a loan from you, a IOU. DeFi is a peer-to-peer loaning network. It's a peer-to-peer financial services network, not just loans, but peer-to-peer financial services. So what it does is it allows people who have cryptocurrency or any sort of digital asset on the blockchain to do all sorts of really cool financial products, but not have to go through an intermediary. They can just do it directly with one another. I could enter into a swap with Sandy without having to have an intermediary sit between us and tell us the terms of that swap. So, or I could get a loan from my neighbor or just a random person on the internet through a DeFi protocol. So that's kind of what DeFi is. And it runs on a series of programs, smart contracts, that say you program in what you want. So if I have a loan with Sandy and if I don't pay on time, then Sandy, there's a smart contract in place that will take all of my collateral and give it to Sandy immediately. So it automates that process that we normally have in contracts, and then you have to go to a court and figure out, or you have to call them up and say, hey, I'm taking control of your collateral. You don't have to do that, it just does it automatically. All right, I'm gonna pause there because that was a heck of a lot. That was the primer. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
When you talk about everybody working on the same ledger, a little bit like a Google Doc.
Yeah, so blocks have to be added to the blockchain sequentially. So different folks could be working on different blocks at the same time, but eventually they're gonna come in a particular order, right? But yeah, I could be entering into a transaction, my husband could be entering into a transaction, Sandy could be entering into a transaction, all at the same time, and those would be added sequentially in blocks.
Will you lose your key with it?
Yes.
This one of the many reasons I don't have any of this stuff.
It depends. Oh no, what did I do? Oh, great. It depends. So are you holding your assets in your own wallet, in a self-hosted wallet? If you lose your key, you can't do anything about it. If you're holding it in a self-custody wallet where somebody else is providing the user interface for you, and oops, already go through that? Oh, sorry. Somebody else is providing the user interface for you, then maybe you're fine. Maybe they'll have a system in place to help you retrieve your key. Likely not, but some are starting to offer that. If you're holding your assets at a third-party custodian and they say you have a private key, you don't really have a private key. You have an account at that custodian and they can help you access your assets if you ever lose them. Similar to a bank. Like if you lost your password to the bank, they're not going to say, oh, your money's gone now. They're going to make sure you can get at it. So it really depends on where your money's being held.
Where your asset.
Super
Yeah.
secure. You have a cold wallet. You have a special place. If that wallet gets
You lost it.
Toast.
You lost your toast. You can't get access. You can't get access to your assets anymore. So it's really funny. There's been bankruptcies where there's just assets stranded and nobody can get at them. They're part of the bankruptcy estate, but what is the bankruptcy court going to do? What happens is they just sit there.
there's no hacker in the world.
Well, I'm not sure if a hacker could get in. I do not profess to be a technologist. Maybe there is a hacker in the world who could hack into your wallet. I don't know how much you'd have to pay to get them to hack into your wallet.
Ransom. Yeah, you could see if somebody could crack that, they
But
could
I
make
think
a lot of money.
If it's a cold wallet, first you have to find the thing, right? And then you have to get access inside of it, right? So then you got a couple steps there. If it's a hot wallet, maybe there's a hacker that can do that, but I am definitely not that type of technologist. Your cold wallet, likely not on your computer, right? Because if it's on your computer and your computer connects to the internet, suddenly it's a hot wallet. Usually what they are is, there's products that you can buy that are like little drives that would store your private key. I guess you could do it on a flash drive. I've never seen that. You just have to have some way to disconnect it from the internet.
And remember where you put it.
I've now spoken for a really long time, Sandy.
So what should we do for let's hit it, securities regulation,
Well, okay, do
cryptocurrency
folks wanna
craziness going on out
Do
there?
folks want to hear more about securities? You guys can have the slides, but do you want to hear more about securities regulation or custody? Is there a preference, one or the other? I could do a little bit of each, but you're not.
That means
Okay, so the SEC is making like a lot of noise out there,
Do you wanna
making
hear about-
people's
yeah.
lives miserable. Do you want to hear about some
The
of that?
SEC drama, or do you want
do
to
I
hear
hear about-
about, okay, my client wants to hold digital assets. How do I make sure that they're holding them correctly?
And so if somebody goes in the tank, they can
They
still
can still
get
get
them.
their assets. Two important questions. You'll have the slides for both.
How many want regulation SEC
Drama.
drama? How many want what happens when my custodian like basically goes in the tank? I think the SEC drama has it.
I'm a
Go
commercial
right
law
ahead.
lawyer
I know,
at
we're-
heart,
we're-
so
yeah.
the custody is just my thing. But you'll
Stabs.
have the slides, so you can look at that later, and I'm happy to talk with you afterwards. Okay, so one common question that I get from friends and family, which I find hysterical, is it illegal for me as just a person, my mom or my dad, to own cryptocurrencies? And the answer is not necessarily. It's really no, but I'm a lawyer, so I put not necessarily. And the reason for
Also
that is
because we get paid by the word.
Yeah,
So that was two, not
exactly.
one.
The reason is, if I got those from a sanctioned person, then that's probably illegal. And if I am trading in so many digital assets that I am making a market, then the SEC is going to get involved. But your mom or dad is likely not going to be trading, or anybody in this room likely is not going to be trading that many digital assets to meet, or not getting them from unsavory sources. So the answer is no, you're fine. So then the next question is, well, why are regulators so worried? So they're worried about preventing money laundering, illicit finance. They're worried about preventing fraud. They're worried about information asymmetry. So when you buy one of these new cryptocurrencies, like one that's not Bitcoin or ETH, how do you know it's legit? How do you know that the company is going somewhere? Or are you investing in that company? Are you investing in the idea of that digital asset? And so
There's like no disclosure.
Exactly.
You have some celebrity hyping it for you.
yeah, and
Thank
so
you
you're
very
like,
much.
oh, maybe I should buy this.
Yeah,
So-
because they own it.
Yeah, so the SEC
So they
is
say.
Exactly. So the SEC is concerned with making sure that you have the information that you need in order to know that you're buying a good investment. And then a more recent concern has been a stable market infrastructure. Crypto's growing by the day, and crypto industry is starting to affect traditional finance markets, as we like to call it in the industry, TradFi markets. So they're also concerned with making sure that the effect isn't a negative one. Like the last crypto winter when FTX went under, they want to make sure that that's not going to have effects across like normal banks. They don't want it to have effects across the rest of the industry. So they're concerned about that as well. So what does that mean? That means that regulation is focused on intermediary market participants. It's not really focused on you and whether you own digital assets. It's focused on the people who are buying and selling them, acting as an exchange, giving you services in that industry. That's where the regulation is focused. So who regulates cryptocurrencies? I love this slide because it's got all the...
Look at all those shields.
There is no regulator, and this is what makes my job so interesting. There's no one single regulator. It's a series of regulators. The one that has been throwing up the most fuss is the SEC, though, so I will start there. But depending on what question you're asking, that's the law that I'm going to look to and the regulator that I'm going to look to. And I'm going to say, oh, you're concerned about some AML concern, then I'm looking at FinCEN. Oh, you're concerned about whether you're violating state law because you're transferring assets. Maybe that's a money transmitter license under an individual state's laws. SEC is, the question is this a security? If it is a security, is the entity that is using that security, are they acting as an exchange, a broker-dealer, or another entity that should be registered with them? So this really, the SEC in particular, is more focused on fraud, and then also these entities that are working in cryptocurrencies and that are securities, are they correctly regulated? Are they following the rules? So why does it matter whether a cryptocurrency is a security? It doesn't matter for most of us, I'm gonna be honest. It matters for these large organizations that are offering and buying and selling them, who are creating these cryptocurrencies and selling them to other people, because if it is considered a security, then you have to have a registration statement or fall under an exemption, and then you have to provide regular disclosures. And so a lot of tokens from earlier on, before the SEC really caught up and has gotten its hand in this, we're doing a lot of this without any registration statements. So that was a problem, or an exemption. So that was an issue. Also, if the celebrity says something about the token that is a material misstatement, they could be liable under the Exchange Act. Or if they omit a fact that you should know in order to be an informed investor, that could also make them liable. And then, of course, I talked about broker-dealers and exchanges. If it's a securities involved, then you gotta be registered. And then there's investment companies. I will save that. Ooh, I did it again. I'll save that for another time.
That was a good song. Was that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
If you can't tell, Sandy and I worked together for a number of years before I moved over to Fidelity. So what are the implications if your digital asset is a security? I kind of explained some of these. You gotta register. You gotta follow the rules. You've gotta be the type of entity that the SEC wants you to be, and you have to follow, like the registration regime is pretty rigid, and it has a lot of important audited financial statements, internal controls, ongoing reporting. It's pretty substantive.
All the stuff FTX didn't have.
Yeah. So what's the SEC doing now? What's all this hubbubaloo? So the SEC started out with saying, okay, these things that you're calling digital assets, that you're calling cryptocurrencies, I think that those fall under the definition of a security under the Securities and Exchange Act. And well, why are they saying that? Well, for the SEC in particular nowadays, even before Gensler was chair, but now especially with Gensler, there's a perception that digital assets and firms, especially after FTX bankruptcy, that these are really risky and it's the Wild West and there's really no disclosure, there's no, it's all retail participants that really can't lose their money if things go wrong. And now there's a concern that even if there are institutional investors, you're going to have an effect on the rest of the market if something goes wrong. So how do they determine whether your cryptocurrency is a security? So this goes back to, this is one of the fun areas about being a lawyer in this area, is that a lot of the law is, and the case law is from like the 1950s and before.
You were not born.
Yeah, so you're applying these precedents that we all know and love to this new technology. So, you know, Securities and Exchange Act, they have a definition of securities, and that includes notes, stocks, bonds, and then it has this thing called investment contracts. And then in 1948, the Supreme Court interpreted what an investment contract could be. They said it's an investment in a common enterprise with a reasonable expectation of profits from the managerial and entrepreneurial efforts of others. As you can see, that's like lots of things could fit in that. And before digital assets came around, the SEC was looking at so many different things like condominiums and stuff like that to see whether this rule applied to them. There's lots of weird things that can fit in here. Chairman Gensler has taken the position that most digital assets are securities. And they have brought lots and lots of enforcement actions. Some of those are fraud. I love to see those. Some of them are against market actors that are trying to do their best in the market, but maybe aren't following the rules completely. Maybe they should be looking at those. And then some of them are against some of the major players in the industry that have the state of, they are trying to do it correctly, but may or may not have fit the bill, because one of the issues is that there isn't a path, there isn't a way right now, the SEC hasn't developed a way to register a digital asset as a security. If I wanted to register something like Solana as a security, the standard forms that I would use to do that don't really fit with the product. So there's really no, right now there isn't a clear path in order to register a security.
Yeah, it's really registering the offering and sale of the security, right?
Yeah.
It's so the issuer doesn't have a way to offer and sell it publicly in a way that
compliant
fits,
manner.
right? And nobody has a compliant way to underwrite that sale, which you do with securities. You know,
And then broker-dealers
right.
can't touch it because it's not a registered security.
Right.
There are exceptions. You can use an exemption like a private placement and things like that, which I won't go into today. Those are very useful, but that's a smaller market. That's not hitting the people who
Yeah,
are
the
buying Solana
volumes.
today, right?
Yeah, that you heard some of the volumes from the dean, right?
So,
Those are
yeah.
those are not private placements going on.
So that's some of the tension that you're seeing in the market is the industry saying, hey, SEC, we need some rules. And then there's some bad actors out there like FTX who are just flouting everything. And then you have, on the other side, the SEC who's saying, like, look, there's real fraud here. We need to protect people against this, and you need to disclose, but then it's an agency, it's slow, it hasn't come up with the rules yet. So there's a tension there that we're seeing play out.
And the SEC is famous for, you know, regulating by enforcement, right? Just going after people rather than but I think it's really heightened now, and they're even getting sued by market participants saying, regulate already. You know, come on, stop talking about it. Stop just going after people and telling them not to do things. Tell us how we can do something. You know, so they've gotten sued by more than one.
They've gotten sued like 3 or 4 times at this point. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're gonna have a little fun. I'll just do it with these two, but there's examples of the other areas of digital assets that we talked about. So Bitcoin and Ethereum. So if we're applying that 4-part test, investment, common enterprise, reasonable expectation of profits, efforts of others. If we're looking at that test and we're applying it to Bitcoin and Ethereum, first of all, Director Hinman was very nice in 2018 and said that these probably aren't securities, these are commodities. And then more recently, the SEC has dropped a case against Ether, or dropped its investigation against certain industry participants using Ether. So we're pretty sure that Ether and Bitcoin are commodities now. But also we can look at the Howey test to say how we come to that conclusion. So factors 2 and 4 are the ones that we'd look to. First of all, there's not really a common enterprise, right? If I'm buying an asset like a security, the common enterprise that I'm investing in is that company, right? When it comes to something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, they're super decentralized. There's no one person running them. So what's the common enterprise that you're investing in? This idea, this ecosystem, but that's multiple validators, that's multiple people. It's not owned by one person. So we think there's a lack of a common enterprise. And then 4 is, who's providing those managerial and entrepreneurial efforts? I mean, again, it's not centralized. It's not one entity that's doing it. It's a bunch of different companies operating in this ecosystem, providing new ways to do financial services on these blockchains. So the general consensus is that they kind of fail 2 and 4, so they shouldn't be considered a security. Stablecoins, another example of something that is probably not a security, because there's really no expectation of profits, right? That's the second factor.
There's an expectation you're not going to lose money,
Yes.
that's all.
But if I'm
right?
holding USDT or I'm holding USDC, I know that I can go anywhere and get it for, I get $1 for it, and that's it, right? So you're not expecting to like get $1.50 because I held it for long enough. So there's no expectation of profits there. And then there's also an argument that there's no entrepreneurial or managerial efforts because it's pegged to an underlying asset. There's arguments in this space, but like who's really, it's pegged to $1. You just have to hold on to the dollar on the other side, and that's all you need.
Yeah, just make sure the dollar is there, so when you want to redeem your stable coin, you get your dollar back.
Yeah, so I'm already cutting into Sandy's time, so I will leave these two for you to look at as hypos if you're interested. This goes through some of the other considerations like broker-dealers, exchanges, and the secondary market, and kind of how the SEC is going after different entities there. And then this is the real fun part.
Yes.
So this is not exhaustive. You can go on the SEC's website and they have a special page that is devoted to all of their cryptocurrency complaints. So this ones are just, I was like, okay, let me just think, what are the 3 in the last week that just caused a huge market impact? The SEC filed a complaint again, or was it a complaint? It might have just been a Wells notice. Apologies for that, I should fix that. They might have filed a complaint or it's just a Wells notice. I need to check that. Against Cumberland. So Cumberland is a really well-known firm dealer. So they were just doing it on a proprietary basis, but they were saying, the SEC says, you're buying and selling so much Solana, AVAX, and these other tokens that the SEC considers securities. You are acting as a dealer. You were literally creating a market for these. There was a wash trading case against a couple of entities. That's more fraud. The SEC is like, hey, that's fraud. Don't do that. And then the Crypto.com brought in an Administrative Procedures Act lawsuit against the SEC, seeking a declaration that the claimed securities violated, that they violated their Wells notice. So there's a bunch of issues there, but a lot of these crypto companies, when they bring these complaints, what they're saying is, you're not following the APA, you're not following the Administrative Procedures Act and allowing notice and comment for these rules. You're just enforcing them against us without us knowing what the rules are. So that's another one in those lines. Coinbase has also brought one. Consensus sued. There's gonna be another one. I'm forgetting them, but there's others. And then there's 3 other actions from earlier in the year that I thought were interesting that I also put up there. Cool. And there's links. And now I'm gonna pass it on to Sandy. I'm gonna get through all my custody stuff. Oh, so many.
Super quick on custody, there are 2 bankruptcies that you'll want to watch. One was Genesis, and the other is Prime Trust.
Celsius.
Celsius. I do that every time.
Prime Trust.
Prime Trust. And Celsius had 2 programs. It had a program where they were custodying digital assets for customers, and a program where their customers allowed them to use their digital assets, and then Celsius would pay a return to the customer. So it's like they borrowed the digital assets and paid, interest or a fee to their customers. So in that bankruptcy, no one really challenged the plain vanilla custody. They said those assets do belong to the customers, that Celsius said, I'm holding them in custody for. But the other ones, they said, no, Celsius owns that stuff. You, dear customer, don't own that stuff anymore. You opted to take a risk by lending it out and getting a return. So they're just unsecured creditors, very unhappy ones. Prime Trust had a very interesting take on how they were holding digital assets for their customers. And they did something we talked about last year, and that's in the slides as well. They decided to not go disintermediated. They decided they would act as a securities intermediary, treat the digital assets of their customers as financial assets credited to a securities account, which would mean, as a UCC commercial law matter, those assets belong to the customers, and that custodial relationship within the Article 8 framework should be respected in their insolvency. It hasn't been challenged directly. Nobody's really talking about the financial asset election, but in November, the time is up for people to present to the bankruptcy court their reasons for why they should be treated as the owners of those assets. And I'm expecting that someone will be like, hey, there was a financial asset election here under Article 8, these things are mine if they're there. You know, if they were lost, then there's pro rata sharing. But if they're there, they should belong to the customers, not to the prime trust entity.
So we're very excited to see that in action.
Yeah, because we never have any case law. But so the UCC drama will be really, really quick. So two aspects to it. Remember from last year, or not, that the 2022 amendments to the Uniform Commercial Code, which, as you know, is not itself legislation, it's a model law prepared by the Uniform Laws Commission and the American Law Institute, did all these 2022 amendments to create a new article of the UCC, Article 12, to deal with Kathryn's favorite, digital assets. Have nice, good commercial law rules for how you can convey interest, property rights in those assets, how you can acquire rights free of adverse claims, and in the way the market thinks you should be able to, right? When you're buying and selling Bitcoin, you think that you're acquiring the Bitcoin and that you're taking it free of adverse claims, that people can't go chasing it around and say, oh, no, I have a lien on that or something. So that was very helpful. But in order to try and make sure that the entire Uniform Commercial Code is more tech neutral and, you know, medium friendly, lots of other amendments were added, one of which, and by the way, 24 states adopted, you see that, like this is moving forward. Okay. Money was defined in Article 1 as the first part of this definition. It's what a government issues, right? Adopts as its medium of exchange, its formal currency. Well, El Salvador and Central African Republic adopted Bitcoin as their official currency. That made Bitcoin money under the Uniform Commercial Code. The only way the Uniform Commercial Code works for money to say that you acquire it free of adverse claims or you can get a lien on it or anything like that is via physical possession. Obviously, you cannot physically possess Bitcoin. So the idea was, really, we didn't mean that governments could go around adopting weird things as currency. We meant when they issue, you know, their official currency that they created. So let's clean that up. And also, let's clean up the fact that there can be electronic money. Let's not limit it to physical money. So these amendments were put as part of the 2022 amendments of the Uniform Commercial Code, hopefully to modernize and say, hey, look at us, we're recognizing electronic money now, and so life should be good. However, the change to the definition of money, which said, oh, it's not something that a government adopts after it has been created, that can't be money. People are objecting to that because they're saying that squelches private issuances of money, and it means that only central banks can issue electronic money, you know, central bank digital currencies that are in electronic form, which forces the market away from the private hands and into the government's hands. And the government is going to be able to use that to have heightened surveillance of its citizens, just like, and I quote, the communist government of China. Okay, so.
That's the opposition.
Yeah. Then we're like, hey, but, you know, the UCC coverage of money is just talking about, can you transfer it? Can you create security interests in it? How can you perfect it? How can you let it live a happy, free life in the, you know, commercial law world? And so that's our first response is, so we really think that you shouldn't care about this. This has nothing to do with central bank digital currency. The code says nothing about that. There is one comment that mentions, hey, you know, some governments are issuing electronic money, and so as their digital currency, have at it. The United States is not. The expectation is maybe the US will do it, but it'll do it as deposit accounts anyway, not like digital money. It'll do accounts at the Fed. So that's great, but the mindset of this is a bad thing for private enterprise and is government overreach and worse, very sinister, has taken root in several, starting in South Dakota, hotbed of commercial law, and has spread to a few other places. And so the folks promoting the benefits of the 2022 amendments kind of said, this is not really worth this kind of fight. If you don't want to deal with electronic money in your state, we can the benefits will be much greater than giving up the whole, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I use that word again. Next slide. And so they...
You still have the Bitcoin problem, though.
Yes, well...
They're like, okay, you don't want to change it. You're going to keep this Bitcoin problem. Bitcoin is still considered money because you won't let us fix it. But if you don't want to,
in
that's
those
fine.
states,
In
which
those
brings
states.
up crazy choice of law situations. But hopefully most big commercial law states will not do these things, will not do any of these cures for the ills of electronic money. There's a general, you just reject it and say state agencies can't accept payments in central bank digital currencies. Okay, great. Washington State just has a non-uniform provision at the end that says, nothing in this act may be construed to support, endorse, create, or implement a national digital currency.
Okay.
Okay. Third one, the hip pocket amendments, which really does it, just like rolls back the amendments to the UCC that deal with electronic money and the change in the
Bitcoin
definition. Therefore, Bitcoin in those states will still be money and will not have the benefit of any of Article 12's rules on controllable electronic records, because Article 12, the scope of Article 12 excludes anything that falls into some other UCC category, like money. So if Bitcoin is money, it cannot be a controllable electronic record. You can't trade it in those states if that law governs. Oh, gives me a headache. But wait, there's more. So we said to you, remember, oh, hey, one solution is custody your digital assets through the traditional intermediated system. So hold it through a broker or a bank who agrees, or Prime Trust, which agrees to hold it as a financial asset for you. And that way you can be sure that as a commercial law matter, you own those digital assets. Okay, this is our little quick picture of the direct end. There's our
From
indirect.
Cyclops.
Well,
I'm
I
sorry.
know
That was
she only has
probably
one
me.
eye. That's
That,
so sad.
when I transferred it over, I think
It's
that must
supposed to
have
be
happened.
the traditional widow or orphan in your law school hypos. There she is, or me when I was young. Okay, next slide. So what happens? Okay, so this is what we said. Article 8. The UCC, if you hold your assets in a particular way, you are treated under the code as owning those assets. 8503 makes clear everything the intermediary has, whether it had it for itself or for you, the dear customers, everything belongs to you, the dear customers, to the extent necessary to be sure that your positions are full, that there's enough assets to cover all the positions that you have with your intermediary. And creditors, stand behind customers generally. However, there's an exception. It says, except as otherwise provided in 8511, and I'm sure all the students in the class and former students know that the except as otherwise provided is sometimes a very large, opens a very large door or window. So 8511 says that if the securities intermediary doesn't have sufficient assets, right, the customer wins, the entitlement holder, that's the word, wins, as opposed to creditors, except in B and C. Claim of a creditor of a securities intermediary who has a security interest in that asset, so think, here's the securities intermediary, the broker has granted a security interest in securities to its lending bank. If that lending bank obtains control of those securities, which it does by maintaining the accounts for that broker. So Bank of New York maintains accounts for Goldman Sachs, who maintains accounts for you, the dear customers. So if Goldman Sachs creates a security interest in favor of Bank of New York Mellon, Bank of New York Mellon will win, and you, the dear customer, will lose if there's not enough stuff to go around. Okay? Also, for clearing corporations, in the diagram, and we talked about it last year, Depository Trust Company is a central depository for the vast majority of publicly traded, not government, but corporate securities in the United States. DTC over there, they are a clearing organization, so back to 8511, if they create a security interest in favor of their lenders, like their end-of-day lenders, if there's settlement turmoil and they need to draw down on their end-of-day line to just make sure all the trades settle, like we're talking the whole market, then those lenders win and the customers or participants of DTC will lose. So what happened? I don't know. This system has been in place since the 90s. This is nothing new. It went through 2008. It went through Lehman. People did not lose money because of this priority rule. The intermediaries are highly regulated, as you know. They're not allowed to run around pledging securities except in certain circumstances, such as margin lending. If you, the customer, wants to buy securities on margin, the broker lends you the money, the broker gets it from somewhere, yes, their bank, and they have to give priority to that bank lender. And there's tons of regulation, and there's Securities Investor Protection Act, which provides some coverage as well. But the truth is, there hasn't been a loss due to this. The objection is fear-mongering, to a very high degree. It is what happens if one day, and this is the Heartland Institute and Fox News, what happens if one day, the links are in the program, you wake up, your whole retirement accounts are gone. They're all gone. All you have is a contract claim against your broker. There's no property rights here. Your property rights have been taken away. You could lose everything, and nobody's telling you the truth about this. And it's really quite awful. And so a few states have, let's see, I think South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma had a hearing on it. I think another one, to try and reverse these priorities and say the customer always wins and the creditors always lose. And one of the problems with this, of course, is that the creditors are also, by and large, highly regulated, and they would not be able to lend in situations where they are not assured of getting repaid and have collateral to satisfy their claims, because that then has systemic risk implications. So the combination of you need this in order for the system to operate, plus the protections that are in place for investors that have withstood the test of time, on top of which you can't really borrow against your 401ks because the tax implications are absolutely prohibitive, and also they're not held in the way that this is, and brokers are not allowed to create liens on them. Anyway, next slide, please. I'm sorry to do that to you. I should be doing it. So the bottom line of the attack is investors are at great risk. The bottom line of the defense is that the UCC rules, as we said, robust federal regulation, SIPC, the history of never having one of these catastrophic losses, or any loss even in Lehman, for individual investors. We're hoping that these efforts will be shot down, because just to give one more plug to the importance of choice of law, one of the changes that these proposals want to bring in, aside from reversing the priority, is to say, we don't like that the choice of law rule points to where the intermediary is, where the broker or the bank is. We don't like that. We want the choice of law rule to determine all this. We want it to point to where you, the dear customer, lives. So that means that a broker who has customers across many states could have different laws applying to their relationship with their customers. Sometimes the customer would win because they live in Tennessee, let's just pretend, and sometimes the customer would lose because they live in New York.
And customers aren't treated equally.
Correct. And the likelihood that DTC would be allowed to have differential treatment of its participants is absolutely zero. So
I also just want to point out some of the other effects is, like, you wouldn't have margin financing in these states. You wouldn't be able to participate in DTC, which is a central function to our security system. And it would just, it kind of goes to the heart and eviscerates the heart of the laws and how they function today. There's you can't read, especially the Uniform Commercial Code, you can't read it alone by itself. It has to be read in conjunction with all of these other laws that protect individuals.
yeah, exactly. And you just reminded me of something, and now it went right. No, it just went out of my head. But we're trying to get FINRA and the Securities Investor Protection Corporation involved to try and help, like the Tennessee Bankers Association made statements and said, no, do not do these changes. This is not good. This is not going to help, our business, or it's not going to help consumers anyway, because it's going to take away access to financing and so forth. So we're trying to get some industry folks involved in helping push back on these. But one of the problems is because the source of these attacks is very, very suspicious of certain organizations, including the Uniform Laws Commission, which they have tarred as being a left-wing organization. I don't even know where it's coming from. So it's very hard. We have to be extremely careful of who you can even try to ask to make an appearance at some of these hearings. One of the hearings, and Professor Johnson, you'll know this, for the Tennessee hearings, the only reason we were able to get someone in there to speak about the importance of maintaining the UCC rules was Professor Sepenuk, because he had moved from Gonzaga to Tennessee. He's at Vanderbilt. So they allowed him to come in and speak on it, and it was very, very helpful. But having anyone from New York come down to any of these would backfire. So drama, stay tuned.
Question and answer.
Yes. Say again?
How did the entities involved running the system?
That system, you're talking to Kathryn, not broker
The
dealers.
digital asset system?
Right.
Yeah. So when you hold, let's say it's a custodian, when you hold your digital assets at a custodian, they're going to charge you a custody fee. Let's say that you want to do a transaction on an exchange and you want to use like any of the big exchanges to do that transaction. You say to the exchange, hey, I would like to send this to this person. And what happens is the blockchain will charge a fee, and then sometimes they will also charge a fee to move your transaction.
They'll pull it out of the asset.
They'll pull it out of the asset, or they'll pull it out of your account. It really depends on the entity. But it's really similar to the way that the market works today in TradFi, in traditional finance. It's where are they making? They're making it on the fees, on the margins.
I hate to do this, but we have a very nice reception in the gallery where you can come and talk with our experts and ask your questions. And
We won't talk with our mouths full.
Information. So please join me in thanking them for coming. And please join us in the gallery. We have some food.